Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Whatcha Readin'. People ask me all the time, Chuck, what are you reading? What you been reading? What current comics are you reading? And the answer is usually, I'm not reading any current comics. Or very few, I should say. But this is where I tell you, what I've been reading, what I've been looking at, and what I think of it. I guess these are book reviews. Anyway, you can help me out a lot by subscribing to this channel. A whole bunch of you have responded to my request for subscriptions because for so long I didn't ask for subscriptions, so nobody bothered to do it. Because why would you? But hit that button below if you haven't. It's free, and it has seriously helped in the last month or so raise my viewership and spread the word about Ask Chuck Dixon and Whatcha Readin' and anything else I might post here. Okay, so I recently read a book recommended by talk show host Jesse Kelly, highly recommended. It's called Subutai the Valiant by Richard A. Gabriel. And it tells the story of Genghis Khan's greatest general, Subutai Bagator. And Subutai was not only Genghis Khan's greatest general, but one of the greatest generals in military history, quite possibly the greatest general in military history. Right up there with Napoleon and George Washington and a whole bunch of other cats who were successful on the battlefield. Subutai was a blacksmith, the son of a blacksmith, and he knew about metallurgy. And he was just a common guy who worked his way in to Genghis Khan's inner circle, and over time proved that he was an absolute genius at both tactics and strategy. And he would go on to lead Genghis Khan's army, or portions of his army. Genghis Khan had a pretty big army. He would lead portions of his army to help Genghis Khan battle the other Mongolian tribes to unite under Genghis. Also help him conquer the northern portion of China, Korea, Russia, and much of Eastern Europe. And in Eastern Europe, this was the site of Subutai's greatest campaigns. In Eastern Europe, the Mongol horde was known as the Devil's Horsemen because they would just show up and destroy every army before them. The Mongol hordes were almost entirely cavalry, and their mounted archers were deadly. They eventually became good at siegecraft. Most of their infantry troops were conscripts from the nations that they conquered. So they did have infantry, but they were mostly concentrated on cavalry maneuvers, at which they were virtually undefeated for a very, very long time, for like centuries. And as you can see, they had an enormous amount of success. This was the Mongolian Empire at its height. It covers 2 continents. It's pretty amazing. And it didn't last a whole long time, but the influence of the Mongols kind of faded away because they weren't interested in politics. They were simply interested in looting. They weren't interested in imposing their culture. So the Mongols, it's not that they were defeated, it's that they were eventually assimilated. Descendants of the Mongols would rule China for a really long time. The longest lasting Chinese dynasty was, in fact, Mongols. But they had totally assimilated into Chinese culture, even speaking Chinese and taking Chinese names. But anyway, the amazing thing about Subutai, and he was just an amazing dude, and he lived to 73, which really, really unusual, first of all, for a guy who lived as hard a life as he did. Also, disease, all the other things that would have killed people in a day where the average lifespan is probably around 30. The most amazing thing for me that he did was he conquered Russia. He conquered Poland, Hungary, most of Eastern Europe, and he did this with his army, which was called the Golden Horde, and it numbered about 50,000 cavalry, mounted archers for the most part, some lancers, and he was always outnumbered on the battlefield, sometimes really badly outnumbered, but he always won because he was a brilliant, brilliant strategist. And when he had conquered Poland, when he had conquered Budapest, that's an epic story in itself. When he had conquered these various European cities and basically destroyed every major standing army in Eastern Europe, he thought about continuing west. And he heard about a city, a fabulous city to the west called Paris. And he was getting ready to take the Golden Horde to ride to Paris. And it's pretty much inevitable he would have conquered all of Europe. But word reached him that Genghis Khan had died. And in Mongol tradition, all of the generals, all of the sub-khans and nobility within the Mongol clans had to return for the funeral of a Khan. And so the Golden Horde turns around, doesn't conquer Europe, goes back to the Mongol capital for the Khan's funeral, and sparing Europe from the depredations of the Mongol hordes. It's estimated that the Genghis Khan in his lifetime is responsible for the death of 40 million people. Almost entirely annihilated the Muslim population of the world. 80% of Muslims died under the invasions and oppression and on the battlefield, fighting the Mongol Khans. So, but it's just an incredible story, and Gabriel does an incredible job telling it. It's not a very long book, but because he gets right to the point, he tells you only the interesting facts, and it's extraordinarily well-researched, extraordinarily readable. It is the perfect popular history. I mean, you could read it in an afternoon, but it's just an excellent book, and I've read many, many books about the Mongols, but this by far was one of the most entertaining and most informative. Now, another book I read is called The Fort by Adrian Goldsworthy. Now, this is a novel, but Goldsworthy has written a lot of books about the Roman army, particularly about the Roman military, nonfiction books. I mean, I have like a whole shelf of his stuff. I didn't even realize how many books I had by him until I bought this book and then kind of took a look. And I'm like, my goodness, I've bought all of this guy's books. And what the fort is, obviously, about a Roman fort. And this one is along the. It's not far from the Danube. In real historical fact, this fort was built to guard the construction of a massive bridge across the Danube, and the fort was threatened by the Dacians. The Dacians were pretty much what we would consider modern Romanians. They were Germanic people, and they were highly organized. The Romans, of course, looked upon them as barbarians, but they were quite civilized. They were good at siege warfare. They had a very organized society. They were very much a match for the Roman Empire. And this novel tells the story of the siege of a Roman fort. And I love a good siege story. If it's Rorke's Drift or the Alamo or the siege of Rhodes, I just love a good siege story where, the end is in question. And basically the Dacians, they want to take this fort down bad. There's a Roman general who's in charge of keeping the fort there, but he's got his own problems because his wife, who he's been estranged from, shows up, and she's a Briton, and she kind of takes over his troops, because his troops are all Briton Celt conscripts. And Brigantians, and it caused a little bit of tension between him and the wife, him and his own troops. But the whole time they're facing this thousands and thousands of Dacian warriors with catapults and trebuchets and siege towers and rams and all the other things that you want in an action-packed siege story. But and Goldsworthy is a authority on Roman warfare, so it all reads really, really well. My only problem with it is he does chapters that are kind of interludes from the Dacian point of view, and they're in italics and they're a bit stilted. And I found that I could skip those chapters and get right back to the story of the Romans, which I was far more interested in. I don't know quite why he made that decision. It's kind of like, I guess, an artful decision. But I found I could pretty much skim those chapters and skip them to get back to the action I was more interested in. But a fun book, and he's written other fiction works based in the Roman Empire, and I'm going to check all of them out. So speaking of sieges, I've written my own siege book, The Siege of the Black Citadel. It is a Conan novel. It is the first of my Conan the Barbarian novels. I've already completed 2 more, which are in the pipeline, and they'll be available soon. This one seems to be selling very briskly, and the people reading it, they like it. They've said very kind things about it, so maybe you'll want to check it out in the links below. The Siege of the Black Citadel, available in paperback in a brand new illustrated edition. Available now. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and see you down the road.